something coming up in his watch your emails. So, that note, now welcome Robin L.
Thank you, Dan, for having us. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this presentation. Our interest in Arctic polar type trips started in 2008 when we went to Alaska. And we were really intrigued and just loved looking at glaciers. And that whole thing was very exciting to us. And since then, we've been to Greenland, Svalbard, which is an archipelago north of Norway, Iceland twice, Antarctica twice. And I didn't really know about the Northwest Passage until online I had seen an ad for a trip through the Northwest Passage. And I was intrigued, and the more research I did on it, I said, oh, this is a trip that I think we need to do. This trip was unique in three ways. First, there was a history of the explorers who searched for the Northwest Passage. Secondly, the history of the Inuit people who have lived in the region where the Northwest Passage is for thousands of years. And third, you have the interactions of the explorers and the Inuits during these explorations. In addition, there's the Arctic wildlife and the beautiful glaciers and icebergs that you see. Since the 15th century, countless explorers have searched for the direct trade route from Europe to Asia, what is now referred to as the Northwest Passage. This direct route, this way, through this whole area, has been difficult to find because of large buildup of ice that surrounds the area's islands for 9 months each year. The ice comes down from this area here, it goes into these channels, and ships can't get through there. The most famous expedition through the Northwest Passage, or an attempt through the Northwest Passage, was by Sir John Franklin, a captain in the British Royal Navy, who led 2 ships called the Erebus and the Terror, and a total of 129 men into the passage in 1845. Winter ice came on the ships quickly, and they were forced to wait until the summer thaw at a place called Beechey Island. And at Beechey Island, during that winter, 3 of the crew died. When the ice melted, the expedition continued to King William Island, and they were forced, because of the ice that they encountered when winter came upon them, they were forced to stay there. In 1847, the remaining crew and both ships disappeared. It became a mystery. Many of the details about these disappearances have recently come to light when the ships were finally discovered in 2014, 2016. Meanwhile, the search for the Northwest Passage continued. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen, you might have heard of, with a crew of 6 men, led the first ship completely through the passage in 1905. Amundsen utilized the knowledge of the area provided by the Inuit to navigate through the passage, as well as their survival techniques for the harsh weather conditions. And Franklin did not use the knowledge of the Inuit, which was one of his downfalls, not making it through the passage. On our adventure, we became the 424th ship to sail through the Northwest Passage since 1905. We were the 91st cruise type ship to actually go through. So, let us begin our journey. Pause.
Let me just thank everybody for coming too. It's not often you get to pull together so many of your friends who are willing to put up with your vacation photos. Our feelings won't be hurt if you get tired of us after a little while. But as Al was saying, the Inuit culture was part of what made this trip fascinating. And all throughout the trip, we were confronted with their language, their written language, which which actually I was able to use like Google Translate and get that. And on the bottom left says Alan, and on the bottom right it says Robin. But what I should have started with was Ula Kut, that's good morning, in Inuktitut. I did bring a copy. We actually had a lesson in how to read and transcribe English to Inuktitut, but we didn't learn that until the end of the trip, which I think was a challenge because we're listening to all these languages, and it was very hard to make sense of. But you know, as learning any language as an adult is really pretty challenging. So our trip started in Greenland, and this is actually the flight pattern from Toronto to Greenland, and it just is so stunning that I thought you'd like to take a look at it. Next. So once we got to Greenland, we immediately got on our cruise ship of, there were 83 passengers with possibility of 130 people. But pretty quickly, they brought us to see what the land looked like. And what you can see, if you look real carefully, is a slight indentation. And that's actually the remains of an old settlement, a Thule, Thule settlement that goes back possibly 200 BCE to 1600. They were the prehistoric ancestors. And then this is also in Greenland. So what I want you to notice, this is a town called Sissamut, population of about 5,500 people, 100 children born every year. We actually have been here before, and it seemed to me, given my great memory of these things, that we actually saw a lot of new building going on. But I want you to notice, these are paved roads. Hold that. One of the things that we saw when we were in this vicinity was a demonstration of a kayaker who used one of these boats. And what he did for over half an hour was demonstrate different kinds of rolling. 360-degree turns. I mean, it was like amazing to see. Unfortunately, we didn't have video going, and I thought, in the interest of time, I would tell you about it instead of having you see it. But handmade kayaks. They do have dog sleds now in Greenland. It's like as the importance of remembering their culture comes back, people do keep communities of dogs. They don't keep them in town anymore. So this is just one shot of a whole community of these dogs. And what's interesting is that after the age, the puppies are allowed to like run free for the first 6 months of their lives. And then they become work dogs. So we were told, do not go near these dogs, do not approach them, they're not friendly, they do not want to cuddle with you. They have a relationship with their owner, and that's about it. So as the trip went on, and we're navigating up Baffin Bay, right? Or no, we're up the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to an area where a lot of the icebergs accumulate, and one of my favorite parts of the trip is looking at the icebergs. So here's an iceberg. Now this is a video of a trip that we took through the iceberg alley. They don't let you go very close to the icebergs because there may be some cave camping, or there may be some other spent the morning just navigating through them, and it's just such a special opportunity to see them. This is Al's picture of humpback whales that we took in this same area.
Fluking. It's called fluking.
It's called fluking for those of you at home. This is a place called Disco Bay, and it's just really, we had actually tried to visit Disco Bay the first time we were in Greenland, and there was, beginning of the season, there was so much ice we couldn't make it up here. So this was at the very beginning of the trip, and we were thrilled to be able to see this.
One of the reasons that I like this trip is that we're going to have an opportunity to go.
One of the reasons I like this trip, an opportunity to go to Disco Bay, as Robin said, one last time it was in May, which was way too early in the season, and there was ice that had not melted, so we were able to go up the west coast of Greenland, but then had to stop eventually because the ice would go back and do other things. And all of these polar trips that you do, there's always the note that they give you that weather conditions may affect the itinerary, and that's typically what happens. Welcome to my world.
We don't want to be here, okay, next.
Yes, dear.
We were there in September, or late August, early September. The whole trip was August through September. Next. So just more ice cream. Can you guys see it? I don't want to stand here. Is this a video too? No, okay. So in the afternoon, they said, you haven't seen enough ice. We need to take you to see more. So this is another community. I forget the size of the town, but they took us through. There was even shopping there, and they took us up to like a museum, and then from the museum there was like a mile hike to go see a different view of the ice field. So this was, an example to show you the breadth of the icebergs as well as the tundra and the foliage that they have there. This is a video, I think, of the ice field. No? Oh, I took that one. No, this is a video.
This is
Okay. And you'll see my great video skills at the end of this. This was also a wonderful place to eat lunch. We sat and picnicked as we...
How cold is it?
What was the temperature there? What was the outside temp?
Between 30 and 40 most of the time. Oh, did you see the puppy running here? There's my great photography. All right. And this is a sample of the housing. I always like to take pictures of laundry, so. Next town is on the southern tip of Disco Island. And you can see, we're still in Greenland. Okay. And this actually, we took a hike there because they wanted to give us the opportunity to be active and just, beautiful opportunities to see waterfalls and walk through hills and stuff. But that little building over there is actually the University of Copenhagen Arctic Station Research Institute in Qeqertarsuaq, Central West Greenland, founded in 1906. There are 39 people that study and work here. And can you imagine, they did not want us to come visit them. So as we took, this was just an example of scenery. Okay. And then, okay. Just leave it.
What do you want?
Next. You can see we didn't really practice this a whole lot. salt columns that I hope you can see how stunningly beautiful they are. This was a Zodiac cruise that we took through here, meaning that we were in like a big rubber raft with about 8 to 10 people in it as we just navigated along. Okay. And you can see that Zodiac, and there's actually an archway through that hunk of rock. And it was really bouncy that day. And that, I think that's the boat that was crazy enough to say, all right, let's do it. And they went through there. The rest of us said, gosh, that would have been nice. But next time. Okay. And there's another view of the arch tunnel. You can see it much more clearly. And it looked pretty calm, but it was really a fun little ride that morning. All right. So now we're in Canada, and we're visiting a settlement that has 700 people on a small island that's part of Baffin Island. I should mention that Canada has 3 territories: the Nunavut, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territory. And most of the visits that we made to communities were in Nunavut, and that's where the Inuit people are. So this people has 700 people that live there, and for those curious about the temperature, it was 60 degrees that day. Okay, 60. Mm-hmm. So in all of these small communities that we visit, they would have some guides that would meet you down at the dock, down at the water level when you got off the Zodiac boat. And then you'd walk through town, you'd see some stuff, and then you'd go to a community hall where they would do a presentation. And in this presentation, in addition to whatever singing and dancing they did, they had an elder do a demonstration, which is now ceremonial, but this was how they heated and lit their sod houses back in the day. But now, they have heat, so modern conveniences. And what she's doing, back originally when they did this, you can see she has a plastic bag filled with Arctic cotton. They dry the cotton, and then they used seal oil originally, so the cotton was the wick, and the oil was, the fuel. Now, they use vegetable oil. But they still do collect the cotton. They didn't want us they didn't really want us to walk through this community, in particular because there had been some bear in the neighborhood, so we were a little bit, close up on the cotton. So they didn't really want us walking freely through there. The guide told us that many of these people had been forced to leave their original community to settle here in this place, and then their original houses were destroyed so that they couldn't return home. Also, to give you an idea about living there, as we were standing waiting for something, one of the teachers in the local high school walked past us with his groceries. Most of the teachers in this part of Canada, in the high Arctic, are actually from the south, meaning southern Canada. And he was from Montreal. And they stayed for a few years and then go back. He was sharing with us some of the challenges that this was still a community where hunting was very important. And so school attendance was not really regular for a lot of these kids. He also told us this community is very isolated. We were there on August 22nd. We were their first tour group. Even 1 month ago, they had been iced in. All of the housing, as Al had said, and most of the supplies need to be shipped in. And as an example of how expensive food is, he had bananas, blueberries, and strawberries, and that cost $60 Canadian. All right. This is one of my favorite pictures. everything seemed to fit beautifully as we proceeded north along Baffin Bay. All right. Another nice one. We're like off of Baffin Island at this point. So, how many people can see something that doesn't belong in this picture? Or actually, it belongs, but there's a bear in the lower right corner. And very exciting. I think it was our first bear sighting. And here's a close-up of him. Lower right corner. On the ice. All right. So now we've just cruised through a long fjord, which was just stunning because of the number of glaciers coming down, and so many of the glaciers were not. You could see how they've been receding over the course of time. But this is toward the. You can see two glaciers over on the left side. All right. And then we were hiking there. Now, this was, for me, the most challenging of the hikes. So I sort of waited in the middle. And then to show you what my world is like, you see that blue coat in the middle there? Yes, that's my husband, the last passenger down the hill. All of the expedition staff around him gathering up the flags and saying, okay, let's go.
What are those flags?
Well, that's just, those are, when we go to an island, the expedition staff gets off first. They scope it out to make sure that there are no bears. And then they flag off where they want you to walk and not to go outside those flags because it may not be safe. There was a cliff over on one side. Obviously, they didn't want anybody to fall. But now, this is the community of Pond Inlet. There are 1,000 people that live in Pond Inlet. They have 3 months of total darkness, which started this year on November 13th and will go through mid-January. And then they have 3 months of daylight. This community has internet. They've had cell service since 2008. They have a Starlink. They have a library, a museum, archives, and a very strong sense of community. After our trip, we joined a WhatsApp group with the people from the trip, and one of them has been sending us pictures from a live cam at Pond Inlet showing about 24 hours of darkness. It's really, and their first snowstorm was in September, I think. This town also has the northernmost Tim Hortons. And we would have all wanted to go there, but it didn't open until 1 o'clock, and we were there earlier in the day. Interesting also, their community, their preschool uses a Montessori approach. We love this photo. Al took this one.
Artsy.
Okay. In this community, one of the things, we talk about what's going to be the animal life that we're going to see as the trip goes along. So one of Al's great wishes was to see a narwhal. But then they told us how the narwhal are very shy, and you may not see a very big glimpse of it. So in the museum, when I saw this one, I said, well, let me just take a picture of it so that we know what it looks like. The houses actually are lit by and heated by diesel power, but here in Pond Inlet and the rest of the communities, there's no public water and there's no sanitary sewer system. The water is delivered by trucks, which think about it, you know, you're running out of water, you gotta call the truck, it's gotta come and bring it. And we didn't think about this till the very end, but they have to collect the waste products too. This is the view from Pond Inlet, and again, you can see some glaciers across the way, so they do hunt there. This does freeze, as we talked about. All right. The tall man standing in the middle is, one of the things that made our trip so wonderful was that there were 2 cultural ambassadors on the trip. They were representatives of the Inuit community. One was this young man, about 31 years old, and he's very athletic. He coaches Arctic sports. So he's going to tell us about the Arctic sports. So, you know, you think about the skills that they needed back in the day. They have to be strong enough to pull a seal up from the ice. They have to be able to, I don't know how they need to kick, but. So what they're doing again, and what his day job is now, AKPAK, A-K-P-A-K, is he's coaching teams of kids, and they do have like competitions among the towns that do this. All right. Community hall.
Okay.
So we're nice and comfortable and warm and, well, I couldn't do it. It's amazing, just amazing. All right, and there's one more. This is, you have to listen very carefully to this. This is throat singing. Could you hear that? I mean, they practice. One of those young ladies was a competition winner, and this is another way that they keep busy during the winter months. I stole this picture from someone because this beautiful young woman and her baby were very friendly, walking around, talking to everybody. my picture of her wasn't as nice, so I give credit where credit's due. But you notice how they carry the babies. So now, we've moved again. We're on Devon Island. This is called Dundas Harbor. And it's an abandoned Royal Canadian Mounted Police site that was inhabited in the 1920s to 30s, and then was used by the Hudson Bay Company. There are 3 graves that we saw in the distance. 1 Inuit child and 2 Mounties who had been stationed here. It's been a ghost town since 1951. This is still near Devon Island, which is the largest uninhabited island in the world. We saw this iceberg, which fell away from the ice cap. This is the ice cap itself, where the glacier meets the sea. The glacier face extends over 2 miles. So use your imagination, because a video just doesn't do it justice. Now, we're at the famous beachy island where Franklin's men wintered in the ice in 1845. And 3 people were buried here in 1846. So we were going to take a long walk across this island, but the spotter spotted a bear. So we had to leave the island and get back on the boats within 20 minutes. And the expedition leader was very proud of us because we did it. And then, this doesn't give you the scope of the size of this guy, but this Arctic hare was huge. He was one big bunny. So, after we got back on board, still in the same spot, there was another polar bear. And he was on land, and he was walking back and forth, and then he decided that he smelled lunch, we think, and he ventured close to the ship. So we were mesmerized by him. He was very entertaining. It was, nice of him to do this for us. And that's Al's close-up of him, so you can see what a ham he was. No, a bear. All right. This is a bird sanctuary called Port Leopold Island Bird Sanctuary. One of the downsides of going when we went is that many of the migratory animals have already started to migrate, so we didn't see as many birds as we would have hoped. And then we spotted another polar bear on land. As we recreated one of the 7 routes through the Northwest Passage, we traveled through a narrow strait, and we were able to land on the northernmost point in the contiguous Americas. So Al made a sign for everybody, and everybody took pictures with this. And if you wanted to see a picture of us throughout this trip, this was what we wore. You had to wear wet pants. They gave you the coat. And of course you had to wear a life jacket.
What do you call construction?
The sign says, Northern Point Zenith, northernmost contiguous point in the Americas.
What is the thing behind you?
It's a cairn. It's a navigational device for sailors. Now these, we go from the huge to the minute. These are 3 different little sea critters, sea angels, sea butterflies, and they're just an important part of the food chain. But, I was just stunned by thinking, here we are spending all of our time looking at these huge icebergs and these mountains, and there's these little living guys just floating around, and they stayed alive. I think they ended up putting them back in the water after we did show and tell with them. But the guy on the upper right, we think he ate one of the sea angels. So as Al had told you, it took until 2014 and 2016 to find the wreckage of Franklin's ships. The exact sites were protected so that we couldn't cruise over them. But we did rendezvous close by so that we could pay our respects with a very special ceremony. The singing of the song Northwest Passage, which is what we were playing while you were eating, by Stan Rogers. But you gotta get how special this is. You may not hear the song, which is pretty spectacular, but take a look.
We wrote this song in the 1970s, and here we are 30 years. I would take the Northwest Passage to find the friend reaching for crazy all life through the lands of blind and savage and live in the Northwest Westward from the nearest strait, his head was set to light. The sea moved to the ocean for so many times. Seeking hope and glory, leaving with the broken homes and the love for that only ends for just one time. I would take.
You get the idea.
The ship and sun.
Yes.
So the person singing, his name was Kevin. He was part of the expedition team. So he was a musician, and it really, having somebody like that on the trip really was special. It had this musical element that you would not think of when you go on a polar expedition. So he would do these songs, and have one example of it, and it provided these really special moments during the trip. I said to the expedition leader that one of the things I liked about the trip was just these special moments. And every day I would think, okay, that's all. And then something would happen that would be special. This was one of those moments that was just really touching. There were like 10 or 12 of the Zodiacs held together. And as Robin noted, he has an electric guitar and speaker, in one of the Zodiacs. It was just like this wild thing. Like, who does that? It was really cool. So that's all I can say about that. One of the areas.
We're in the vicinity. They were actually pretty close to each other. Well, relatively speaking, they were close to each other. So now, these dots on the map are the early radar detection warning system called the DEW lines, Distant Early Warning Lines, in the 1950s. Their purpose was to protect from bombers, not missiles. There were 63 sites that were strategically placed between Alaska and Greenland. The sites quickly became obsolete and were dismantled. So this is a place called Jenny Lind Island, named after the famous singer. And we were hoping, well, the expedition leader had been using maps she found online, and we were hoping to walk to the abandoned site, which you can see faintly in the distance over there. This is actually, just a road that they built for the trucks or whatever. And she sent out these two strapping young expedition guys to find it, scope it out for us. But the map that they used wasn't accurate. And although we embarked on what turned out to be a long, tedious walk, this was nothing compared to what the scouts had done. They walked 20 kilometers and discovered, instead of an abandoned site, an active generator. They got out of there really fast. And interestingly, the next day or later that night, as we were sitting in the dining room having dinner, people noticed this huge Huey helicopter hovering over the boat. So they knew we were there. All right. This is, well, I'll let you talk.
This is an Arctic fox, and we went on an excursion late in the afternoon to just check out the area, and we noticed this fox. And so we got as close as we could without spooking it, and I was sitting in the front of the boat taking like pictures like crazy. And the sun was setting, so I was able to get this really cool photo of the sun setting behind the fox, which created this glow around the fox. So we actually had 3 photo competitions during the trip. They broke it up into sections of the trip, and so this photo was one of the first place winners in the photo competition. So,
And you won that.
and the shirt I'm wearing was one of the prizes for finishing first.
What kind of camera were you using?
It's a Nikon D5100 with a 300 zoom, and then it's cropped. So
And I use my iPhone. This is the community of Cambridge Bay. This was the last community in the Nunavut territory. This woman is not local. She's been there about 10 years, and she does community relations and organizes when people come visit. She told us this real interesting story about these 2 statues that gave you a sense of the importance of the elders in the community. There had been some kids who were doing naughty things, and the Inuit philosophy is not to punish. So the elders took these kids and they had them take scrap metal and create, and allegedly that turned them around, and look at what they made. They then told somebody later on that the 2 wolves were the white people encroaching upon their native territory. So in this town, same town, we met several local women who were heavily involved in making this Cambridge Bay a cohesive, forward-thinking community. And as a result of that, they were able to be chosen to be the site of the Canadian High Arctic Research Center. I mean, you just saw what the town looked like. Unpaved roads, still water, not, no water site. But this place is responsible for like 4 current research projects that are happening throughout the High Arctic. And interestingly, there were also military exercises that were taking place in Cambridge Bay at the time. Their purpose was to improve cooperation among all the branches of the High Arctic Service. And they were the ones that sent the Huey to visit us the day before. And just the architecture of this building was really quite spectacular. And this is just, the inner rotunda of the meeting room that we were in. This town also, we walked the unpaved streets, we saw the water truck delivering water, we visited the library, the museum, and the gift shop that were housed in the local high school, and then we went into the visitor center. This was our local guide who had just graduated from Cooley Nick High School. And what this town does is they use high school sports kids as their tour guides, and the money that the ship pays goes to their team. And these kids play basketball, which I thought was interesting. In this museum, gift shop, library, this was the playroom for some of the kids. I just thought it was so cute. We need igloos here too. So this nice town provided snack for us. So puffed pastry, and we don't remember what the gushy stuff was on top. And there also, which we did take a picture of, there was also a salsa that I think had char in it. We voted that one was the best. And for dessert, chocolate chip cookies. But the chef was an interesting young woman. She had grown up, one of her parents was originally from Cambridge Bay, so her parents got divorced. So she spent some of her time in Cambridge Bay, and then she lived in Spain with the other parent. So she was trained as a chef in Spain, came back here to make some money, because I guess you get paid really well. There actually is a hotel in the town of Cambridge Bay that she works for, and they do this for the 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 tour groups that come per year. All right, now we're back on the ship. Here's our friend Akpak showing more Arctic gates. Is this a, no? Yeah, but it's not us. It's not a video, right? Video?
No.
Okay, so, yeah, he's mimicking the seals moments. Next one. Oh, they do use volunteers from the ship to play these games.
Doing a knuckle pull with one of the other shipmates.
A knuckle pull.
That's
Who
what it's
won?
called.
I forgot.
Yeah, he won. Yeah, I held that pretty long though, but he was strong.
And they did a whole bunch of different ones, but. Now here's another, this is called Victoria Island, and there's another active dew line in the distance that you can see. Again, relatively flat. Most of us walked on roads here, the gravel roads. Could have even been an airstrip at some point. Okay. And this is just a walk on the tundra to show you the fall colors. Now this is really cool. These, you can see, they're called stromatolites. They're long extinct, and they were created by microorganisms. Wikipedia says that stromatolites are a major constituent of the fossil record of the first forms of life on Earth. They peaked about 1.25 billion years ago. And we just walked, look at that, is that like not stunning? So this, the vegetation, this is the tallest tree we saw on our entire trip because we were above the tree line. And the expedition staff was actually pretty excited that these were as tall as they were. Maybe they were like 2 feet, not even, but it was pretty expansive. This is some sort of, was it a blueberry or, but this became another like buzz point for the trip because the other cultural ambassador was a woman in her, we'll say, 50s, named Gila. And Gila loves these little blueberry things. So whenever we saw a patch of them, every hike stopped, everybody's picking blueberries and just eating them from the road, from the field. So this is our last community visit. And we're now in the Northwest Territory. This had been known as Holman, but it's now known as Uluk Naktok. And this just blew us away because there are only 480 people that live here. It's actually on the other side of Victoria Island from Cambridge Bay. But when we got off the Zodiacs, there were these elders just sitting there waiting to greet us. And we went through a reception line and shook hands with all the people. It was just really so sweet. At the end, as we were heading back, they treated us to a demonstration of cutting studying Arctic char. This elder is amazing because you'll see her again in a video. She's greeted, she danced, she sang for us, and Sheila is the woman in the red coat in the back. See how cute she is? So this is just a sample of the housing there. You can see, you know, the town, you know, like spreads around the bay. We saw this sign in the town hall. Stand together against racism. Love comes naturally. Hate is learned. This was our guide. This is Louise. And she's an amazing craftswoman. That's a picture. She brought us into this community house to show us her tapestries because this is what she does. And and there were several of us who said, "Oh, got any you want to sell?" And she said, "Oh, no, thank you. I'm busy enough. I'm going to be creating tapestries for the local hotel, and they're going to put one in every room." So now this is a video, but let me just say that I love this because the town, this is an entertainment for the town too. So you'll see as these folks are singing and dancing, there's a lot of movement. And the little lady who was cutting the Arctic char, who was on the receiving line, was the one leading the singing. All right, this one is great because there's a little guy in here. He went up and danced every dance that he could. And then after these guys did the traditional stuff, then an electric guitar, an acoustic guitar, and a violin came out, and they did more modern American music. And then at the end, they did an instrumental of Amazing Grace, which was stunning. One of the small world things about this trip is that the government requires, the Canadian government requires somebody, a regulator, to, you're going the wrong way. The government requires a regulator to go on to make sure that the ship does not exceed 10 knots per, whatever it is, knots per mile. And because we were in a whale zone, of course, I don't think we saw any whales, but they, so this young guy is on the ship, and his mother said, "Go look for my first cousin who lives in this town of Holman." They connected on Facebook, the cousins. He had never met this woman because travel is so restricted. You know, they can only, it's the easiest and most effective way to travel is by boat, and then that's only in the summer. And if you're flying somewhere, it's very expensive. The other thing about this town that's so special is that several days before we got there, they had experienced a tragedy. There was a hunting child got killed. And yet this town mobilized and, graciously welcomed us and showed us their best. I mean, it just really went to show how special the whole experience was. These, you can see, this is not fog, this is actually smoke. These rocks spontaneously combust because they contain shale and oil, and they create this smoky look and sulfuric smell. And there was, a whole chain of them, but this was pretty cool. Have you ever seen a fog boat before? We had. It was really pretty cool. A fog boat, Fogbow, a fog boat, not a rainbow. They explained what it was, but I don't remember. So, when we started this trip, we were almost on, not 24 hours of daylight, but pretty much a lot of light. And then as we went west, the time we kept adding an hour, and it kept getting darker earlier and earlier. So we were hoping that we'd be able to see northern lights. And with the help of our camera, we did. One night. Okay. So now we're in Alaska. Due to United States regulations, our ship wasn't allowed to land on U.S. soil, but we did add an American pilot so that we could more closely approach U.S. soil. This is actually a little town called, a little community, population 77, I think, or 700? Can't be 77? This is called Little Diomede. And we actually watched a documentary about this place and how they were trying to improve it over time. But Little Diomede is in the Bering Strait. And next to Little Diomede is Big Diomede. And Big Diomede is Russian. So we actually were able to navigate between the two Diomedes. And at one point, we're standing on deck, and they said, okay, if you put your hand out over the water, you're going to be in Russia. And then 2 minutes later, they said, oops, all of you were in Russia. Big Diomede is now abandoned, but you could see Russia from there.
Why don't we go to the U.S.?
It has to do with something called the Jones Act, and it's very restricted. It's the reason why cruise ships can't go to two foreign cruise ships can't go to two American ports in a row or something, so they go. That's why, like, the trips to Alaska, I don't know. But it really is very restrictive, and it's hard to understand why some of these rules make sense. They were telling us too about that the United States government wants a United States Zodiac boat, and it's not necessarily the finest boat, to get around.
The company that we were,
The company that we were using was Aurora Expeditions, which is an Australian company, so that had something to do with it because it was an international company and you're on American soil, and so we didn't quite understand all these crazy rules, but it was what it was.
So we also, next, the weather didn't quite cooperate with us in terms of looking at this small abandoned community. It was called Yukavok. It's on King Island. And for thousands of years, it was home to a bustling township that hunted, lived off the land, and survived with limited limited resources. They built houses from the ground up on stilts, and then we're very happy there. But this is what it looked like. Well, I mean, this is what it looks like now, abandoned, but the houses were on stilts. And because of war, illness, and then they closed the public school, everybody else left. And some people are now trying to go back and recreate or, you know, fix up some of the houses to use as summer homes. But, and then, yeah.
Why were they built on stilts?
Probably because of the surge of water. Yeah, it's on the hillside. Yeah, yeah. In order to be a level house, it had to be on stilts. So the trip ended in Nome, Alaska, and Al was desperate to see a muskox.
So we didn't see a narwhal, although supposedly some people think like 3 seconds saw one. But so the other big thing to see was the muskox. And we did at one point see a group of muskox on a hill way in the distance. I have a picture of a tiny little muskox. But so throughout the trip, I want to see some muskox. So we got to know Alaska, and it turns out that the muskox like to hang out in the cemetery. So we were there for like a day and a half, and they actually did some tours to find muskox, and they knew where they were that day because they were all hanging out in the cemetery. So when we went, when our group went, the muskox were sleeping, lying on the ground, and not doing anything much to our dismay. So I got some photos of them just kind of laying there, and then so happy to see them. And then another group went out later, and the muskox are up and walking around and doing everything. So one of our friends got this picture of the muskox. Beautiful view, as opposed to just lying on the ground where you can't really see much of it. But the townspeople aren't happy about them in the cemetery because they knock over the stones, and they do their thing in the cemetery, and it's not good for it. But
Just looking,
Where his eyes are and his ears.
yeah. So we say, oh, muskox. Yes.
So that concludes our quick visit through the Northwest Passage in comfortable 78 degrees. No turbulence, although we never had turbulence on this boat ride either, so I didn't have to take Dramamine, or use a scopalaline patch, or anything. It was a very special experience. I think we figured in these small communities, if they get somewhere between, at most, 8 to 12 tours per year, maximum size, let's say 80 people, and many of these are much smaller, that there are maybe 800 people who go through the Northwest Passage per year. It's like pretty cool to be having this experience. Melania.
Well, I was wondering, you were talking about Dramamine and medication.
Yeah.
How accessible were the healthcare facilities?
Oh, there was actually, that's a great question. Medical care. This is such a remote trip that the cruise has an onboard doctor who stays the entire trip. They actually had a second doctor who did all of the excursions as well. And luckily, I think for everybody, the most dramatic thing that he had to deal with was blisters. Somebody had some
But
blisters.
in your trip, what did you notice about healthcare facilities for
Healthcare
who
facilities,
live there?
healthcare facilities, many of the communities were building bigger, more expansive healthcare, but they did not have emergency. And many of them didn't even have a doctor. They had nurses, maybe nurse practitioners. And again, they were mostly probably people who came up from the south.
Thank you.
Fresh fruits and vegetables, well, now they can fly them in. The other kinds of goods, it's more efficient for them to ship them in. But interestingly, I think obesity is now a problem because a lot of the durable goods that they get, we're walking through some of these towns, and what are the kids eating? Chips and, just junk food galore. So the trip was almost 30 days long.
Cultural relationship, I mean, you look at people up there, but then they have internet and TV, and what's their relationship with the rest of the world? I mean, how do they view where they're at and the things that are someplace else? Are they glad to be there, happy? I don't know,
Well, it's always interesting, you go to a community, and I mean, we live the lifestyle we live, and the conference of so many things, and you go to a community like that, you think, oh my God, how do people live like this? But, when you think about, this is what you know, this is where you live, this is family, this, you live here, you know how to live here, you know what the environment is, and what you have, and you're happy. And so, there are some people who, some of the adolescents who end up going to college, they go south to college, and a lot of them actually come back because this is their home, and so some of them go on and don't return, but many do come back. So it's an interesting question, but you live where you know and who you know, and you're happy there, and they're exposed to the outside world because of the internet, but still, a lot of them still stay there, so.
Can you go back, if you go halfway and you go south, if you had gone straight there, would that have been navigable?
No, that's why, there's actually 7 routes, theoretically, to go through the Northwest Passage. The 2 most common are the ones that go south, that, go into the passage the same way, but then end up traveling south to go across, because if you think about it, south is going to be a little bit warmer, the ice is going to melt. Even though the passageway is smaller, the ice is going to melt more quickly. And so, we took one of those southern routes through. And each year is going to be different, how with climate change and, the ice melts a little quicker, but when we were in Cambridge Bay, I think, we were told that 2 weeks prior to that, you couldn't get in. There was so much ice. So they have other trips, partial trips through the Northwest Passage, and those partial trips ended Cambridge Bay, and they couldn't get in those 2 trips because of the ice still being there. And so we were able to get through because we were 2 weeks later, and that's the chances you take when you do these trips. But there are, there's 2 more common ways to get through that go through the south.
Just a question, the Amazing Grace that they played, what kind of religious beliefs? Could you get any feel for whether they tend to be Christians or whether it's indigenous religions?
I guess they're all Christian, is basically Christianity is what they follow. We were surprised when we heard that. Really interesting. I know you can see Tuesday. And we know. No.
Just wondering if they talked about changes due to climate change in the area, and also the areas that you went through. Do you know if they were protected from people coming in to try to drill for oil or mine anything there? Did they talk about that at all?
I think the Canadian government is very mindful of the threat from to like claim their territory, and but Canada is vehement that they maintain control of this. It's part of the reason that some of the communities have been falsely moved to more northern communities, because the agenda from the Canadian government was to, lay claim to sovereignty to people living there. And yet these people were taken advantage of because they were told, oh, if you go to this town, hunting is good, you're going to love living here, and the conditions were much harsher than they expected. And so they wanted to go back, and the Canadian government said, no, you're not allowed to go back. If you want, well, you can, but you have to pay for it. Well, how do they have money to pay for it? So at this point, the Canadian government is subsidizing some of the more expensive aspects of living there. I think they provide a stipend for families with children, and in some of the northernmost communities, they offset the cost of some of the food.
Were the polar bears protected?
I think, the cruise company, are the polar bears protected? Yes, I think these companies that come, these cruise companies that come in have arrangements. You're not, the last thing that you want to do is shoot a polar bear. And so they have, don't go if you already see one. You have to be a certain distance away from them before you can be on an island with them. And
It was really interesting before we left, and I was thinking, oh my God, I'd love to see the polar bears. It was like seeing polar bears. And I never thought it would be bad to see a polar bear, because we couldn't, if there's a polar bear on land, we couldn't do an excursion to land. So it ended up being a negative thing. It was really kind of interesting. But yeah, they're very mindful of, conscious of, not bothering theirs, not being near them because of the danger of it. And so it's an interesting relationship. And as the years go on, these companies even have more restrictions about how close you can get to animals, and protecting the environment was always an issue. So all of these polar type expeditions have strict rules about when you do a landing, making sure you're not bringing anything foreign on board. Like when we were doing, especially the Antarctica trips, we were always very conscious. We have a time set aside to check all of your clothing, make sure there were any particles of anything that you were bringing to land. And every time you came back from an excursion, you had to wash your boots off. You had these big trays with liquid in it. You had to step in and make sure your boots were clean. So, very protective of the environment. Questions?
Were there any areas of geothermal activity on your route?
Any areas of geothermal activity? I don't. Well, except for the Smoky Hills, where you have the smoke coming from there, but I don't.
yeah, they have electricity, but it's because you can see the power lines, exposed power lines, but it's like diesel fuel. In every one of those pictures of the communities, you can see the big diesel tanks down by the water. So that was for. Yeah. John?
Given that they have limited medical data and they're so isolated, is there ever any conversation about how we handle, for example, children or people with disabilities?
What did she say?
People with disabilities, what's done for them? There was brief conversations about that. In many of the communities, the women leave their town and go to a bigger community for the last part of there. Oh, they go to the Yellowknife before the baby is born. Yeah, one lady told us she wasn't from, the town we were in. Oh, where are you from? Oh, I was born in Yellowknife. And then my mother came back, a couple of months after I was born. Specifically, I don't remember what they do for special education or, people who are blind or people who are deaf. Nothing specific.
Since you like Arctic trips, where's your next trip?
Oh, you know where it is.
Next Arctic trip.
Thank
Well,
you so much. It was so interesting.
The next Arctic trip, we're actually going to go back to Greenland again. In 2026, there's going to be a total solar eclipse over Greenland. So that'll be fun. Yeah, we did, as a matter of fact.
We booked it also.
Oh,
You
really?
going on that trip? No.
It's a celebrity.
No.
It's gonna be out at sea for the
Oh,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Let's thank.
No, here. There. Now it's sitting here.
Oh, I thought you did. Yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah, what? Yeah. And Marta said she couldn't believe that he does his process. Yeah. Well, their plays only run for a month. They don't go on. Oh, I know. Yeah.
Like she's not really just.
Is that your process? Yeah. Yeah. Good in you. Oh, she's still traveling? Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I went to the ship on Friday night. That was nice too. Yeah. Yeah, but they're gonna, they're actually having one at the church now. Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. Yeah. I guess they have enough people, a lot of people from the church are doing that too. And Julia's still get to this thing. Yeah. Yeah, she's doing good. Yeah. She just has new problems. Like now she has an aide who was like, they were trying to get him out because he was like cutting a lot and he smells like marijuana. But then now she has this new aide, actually, his personal aide actually aggravates the student. So she's afraid the student is going to come, to school. So that's her latest problem. Just one thing after another.
You like it?
Yeah. 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 But she said she wants to help with the sports, with the diversity, the unity sports for the disabled kids. Yeah, so she might be able to do that in the spring. In the meantime, they said she'll help with the yeah, or like Saturday activities. Yeah. Yeah, but she's supposed to get involved in the school. Yeah.